Who were Ephraim and Manasseh? These two names might not come up as often as some other biblical figures, but their story is powerful and filled with meaning. Ephraim and Manasseh were the sons of Joseph, the beloved son of Jacob who rose to power in Egypt. Joseph, years earlier, had been rejected by his brothers. They had thrown into a pit and sold into slavery for 20 pieces of silver to some Midianite traders who brought him to Egypt. He was bought by Potiphar and worked as a slave in his house. God prospered all that he did, and soon his master put him in charge of all that he owned. Sadly, when he was falsely accused by Potiphar's wife of assaulting her, he was thrown into prison for 3 years. But God was with him even in prison, once again prospering all he did. Through a fortunate, providential series of events, he was delivered from prison and elevated to second in command of all Egypt. In Egypt, he married Asenath, the daughter of a high-ranking Egyptian priest. Interestingly, her name means belonging to wisdom. She bore him 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Joseph named his firstborn son Manasseh, meaning to forget. For Joseph, this name signified the closure of a painful chapter in his life. Manasseh represented a healing process, a release from the anguish and betrayal that he had endured. By naming his son Manasseh, Joseph was declaring that he was moving forward, leaving the past behind, and embracing his new life in Egypt. Joseph's second son, Ephraim, was named to reflect the concept of fruitfulness or prosperity. In Ephraim's name, Joseph recognized the abundance he had received in Egypt. Despite the years of suffering and separation from his family, Joseph had been blessed with success and prosperity beyond what he could have imagined. Ephraim symbolized the fulfillment of this divine favor, the fruitfulness that Joseph experienced in a foreign land. Now, Ephraim and Manasseh's upbringing was unlike that of their Israelite cousins. They grew up in the luxury of Egypt, surrounded by the grandeur of a palace, rather than the pastoral, nomadic lifestyle of Jacob's descendants in Canaan. Their mixed heritage placed them at a unique crossroads. They were heirs to the faith and legacy of their Israelite ancestors, while also being shaped by the powerful Egyptian culture in which they were raised. This dual identity gave Ephraim and Manasseh a distinct role in Israel's history, bridging the traditions of their Israelite roots with the powerful influence of Egypt. In ancient Israel, family lineage and identity were deeply valued. Ephraim and Manasseh, as sons of Joseph, carried the weight of their father's remarkable legacy, a story that exemplified resilience, integrity, and divine favor. By the time of their birth, Joseph had become a symbol of God's faithfulness and blessing, and his sons embodied this legacy. They were more than just descendants. They were carriers of a profound heritage that spoke of redemption and triumph over adversity. Jacob, their grandfather, recognized the significance of these boys. Despite their mixed heritage and upbringing in a foreign land, he saw in them a continuity of God's promise to his family. In a remarkable act, Jacob chose to adopt Ephraim and Manasseh as his own sons, elevating them to the status of his other children. This was a profound and symbolic gesture. By adopting them, Jacob ensured that Ephraim and Manasseh would be counted among the tribes of Israel, inheritors of the same promises and blessings bestowed upon his direct sons. For Jacob, this adoption was more than a familial formality. It was a spiritual act that brought Ephraim and Manasseh fully into the fold of Israel, binding them to the covenant legacy that defined Jacob's lineage. Through this adoption, Jacob ensured that these 2 grandsons would inherit the blessings of God's covenant with Israel, regardless of their birth in Egypt. In Genesis 48, we encounter a moment of profound significance in Israel's history. Jacob, also known as Israel, remember, that was the name given to him when he wrestled with the angel, extends his blessing to his grandsons, Ephraim and Manasseh. This scene is deeply rooted in ancient customs and spiritual traditions that went far beyond mere family ties. Each word and action within this passage carries intentional meaning, connecting generations and shaping the destiny of an entire people. Let's walk through each verse of Genesis 48 to uncover the layers of spiritual significance in this powerful blessing. In case you want to know more about the biblical characters who got new names, go through the contents on our channel and you will see it. Watching it will provide valuable insights. Now let's return to the Bible verses. Verse 1. Some time later, Joseph was told, "Your father is ill." So he took his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, along with him. Joseph receives news that his father, Jacob, is critically ill. Recognizing the importance of Jacob's final days, he brings his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, along with him. Joseph understands the significance of his father's blessing and likely anticipates that Jacob, the patriarch of Israel, will want to pass on spiritual and prophetic blessings. Ephraim and Manasseh are unique in that they were born in Egypt, far from their Israelite roots, and raised with Egyptian influences. By bringing them before Jacob, Joseph ensures they are anchored in their ancestral lineage and that they receive a part in Israel's covenantal blessings. Verse 2. When Jacob was told, "Your son Joseph has come to you," Israel rallied his strength and sat up on the bed. Though weak and near death, Jacob gathers his strength to receive Joseph. Notably, the text refers to him as Israel, underscoring his role as the bearer of the covenant rather than merely a dying father. This is more than a personal moment. It's a pivotal event for Israel's lineage. Jacob is about to enact a spiritual ritual that will formally include Ephraim and Manasseh in Israel's promises, extending God's covenant beyond his immediate sons to his grandchildren. Verses 3 to 4. Jacob said to Joseph, "God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan, and there he blessed me and said to me, 'I am going to make you fruitful and increase your numbers. I will make you a community of peoples, and I will give this land as an everlasting possession to your descendants after you.'" Jacob begins by recounting his encounter with God at Luz, or Bethel. Here, God blessed Jacob and reaffirmed the promises initially made to his grandfather Abraham. These promises include the multiplication of Jacob's descendants and the possession of Canaan as an eternal inheritance. By reminding Joseph of this, Jacob underscores that the blessing he is about to give to Ephraim and Manasseh is directly connected to God's promises to Israel. He frames this as a covenantal blessing, emphasizing that Ephraim and Manasseh will be woven into God's grand design for his people. Jacob is not simply blessing them as a grandfather. He is acting as a vessel for God's promises. Verse 5. "Now then, your 2 sons born to you in Egypt before I came to you here will be reckoned as mine. Ephraim and Manasseh will be mine, just as Reuben and Simeon are mine." Jacob adopts Ephraim and Manasseh, placing them on equal footing with his own sons. This act is profound because it incorporates these 2 boys into the inheritance of Israel directly. In the culture of the time, inheritance was typically limited to sons, with grandsons receiving blessings through their fathers. By elevating Ephraim and Manasseh, Jacob ensures they receive a double portion in the inheritance, which is usually reserved for firstborns. This move establishes Ephraim and Manasseh as heads of their own tribes within Israel, as opposed to simply being Joseph's descendants. This adoption symbolizes that God's promises extend beyond direct descendants to encompass generations, embracing all who are incorporated into his covenant. Verse 6. "Any children born to you after them will be yours. In the territory they inherit, they will be reckoned under the names of their brothers." Jacob clarifies that future children of Joseph will not receive the same status as Ephraim and Manasseh. Instead, they will inherit land and blessings within the territories of Ephraim and Manasseh. This distinction is significant. It emphasizes that Ephraim and Manasseh hold a unique, elevated place in Israel. Jacob's specific instructions underscore that Ephraim and Manasseh will bear the primary legacy of Joseph and will be named among the tribes of Israel as founding patriarchs. Jacob's act is both prophetic and binding. He is designating Ephraim and Manasseh as permanent fixtures in Israel's identity. Verse 7. As I was returning from Paddan, to my sorrow, Rachel died in the land of Canaan, while we were still on the way, a little distance from Ephrath. So I buried her there beside the road to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. Jacob recalls the loss of Rachel, his beloved wife and the mother of Joseph. This recollection adds an emotional depth to the blessing, as Jacob's affection for Joseph is partly rooted in his love for Rachel. By bringing up Rachel's death, Jacob connects Ephraim and Manasseh to her legacy. Rachel's untimely death was a source of sorrow for Jacob, and in a way, Ephraim and Manasseh symbolize a continuation of Rachel's line. This moment not only honors Rachel's memory, but also adds to the gravity of the blessing. Jacob is conferring upon them the heritage of both the living and the departed. Verses 8 to 9. When Israel saw the sons of Joseph, he asked, "Who are these?" "They are the sons God has given me here," Joseph said to his father. Then Israel said, "Bring them to me so I may bless them." Jacob formally acknowledges Ephraim and Manasseh before proceeding with the blessing. By asking, "Who are these?" Jacob is inviting Joseph to present his sons for the blessing, marking the ritual's official start. Joseph's response, acknowledging that his sons are a gift from God, reflects his understanding of their place in the divine plan. Jacob's directive to "bring them to me" signifies the gravity of the moment. He is preparing to enact a sacred tradition, one that will not only bless, but also establish these boys within Israel's legacy. Verse 10. Now Israel's eyes were failing because of old age, and he could hardly see. So Joseph brought his sons close to him, and his father kissed them and embraced them. Though Jacob's physical vision is failing, his spiritual insight is sharp. The failing eyesight symbolizes his impending departure from this world, yet his actions are deeply intentional. His embrace and kiss signify affection and approval, but they also represent acceptance into the covenantal family. This blessing is not only a formality, it is a declaration that Ephraim and Manasseh belong to God's chosen people. The kiss and embrace serve as a physical manifestation of Jacob's commitment to incorporate them fully into Israel's identity. Verse 11. Israel said to Joseph, "I never expected to see your face again, and now God has allowed me to see your children too." Jacob's gratitude overflows as he marvels at God's generosity. Years before, Jacob believed that Joseph was lost to him forever. Now, not only has he been reunited with Joseph, but he also has the joy of meeting Joseph's sons. This moment captures the depth of God's providence and the way in which God restores hope and fulfillment. Jacob's words reflect a sense of awe and thanksgiving, recognizing that God's plans often exceed human expectations. This reunion with Joseph's family is a testament to God's faithfulness. Verses 12 to 13. Then Joseph removed them from Israel's knees and bowed down with his face to the ground. And Joseph took both of them, Ephraim on his right toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh on his left toward Israel's right hand, and brought them close to him. Joseph prepares his sons for the blessing, positioning them according to tradition. Manasseh, as the firstborn, is placed to receive the primary blessing from Jacob's right hand, while Ephraim, the younger, is positioned to Jacob's left. This arrangement reflects the cultural significance of birthright and the belief that the firstborn is entitled to a greater share of honor and inheritance. Joseph's act of bowing signifies respect and reverence, acknowledging both his father's role as patriarch and the importance of this sacred ritual. Joseph's actions underscore his recognition that this blessing is rooted in the covenant with God. Verse 14. But Israel reached out his right hand and put it on Ephraim's head, though he was the younger, and crossing his arms, he put his left hand on Manasseh's head, even though Manasseh was the firstborn. In a surprising and deliberate move, Jacob crosses his arms, placing his right hand on Ephraim, the younger brother. This act defies tradition and conveys a prophetic message. By reversing the expected order, Jacob is declaring that God's plans for Ephraim are distinct and that he will surpass Manasseh in prominence. This crossing of arms is an intentional prophetic act, revealing that God's blessings are not bound by human customs. Jacob's choice reflects a divine insight that transcends the usual expectations of birthright and hierarchy. Verses 15 to 16. Then he blessed Joseph and said, "May the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked faithfully, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day, the angel who has delivered me from all harm, may he bless these boys. May they be called by my name and the names of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and may they increase greatly on the earth." In this blessing, Jacob begins by invoking the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked faithfully. This opening is significant because it connects Ephraim and Manasseh to the patriarchal lineage and to the covenant relationship established by God with Abraham, then Isaac, and then Jacob himself. Jacob's reference to the God who has been my shepherd is deeply meaningful. By describing God as his shepherd, Jacob highlights the continuous guidance, care, and protection he has received throughout his life, despite facing numerous hardships. This imagery of God as a shepherd indicates a personal relationship in which God actively leads, provides, and watches over his people. Furthermore, Jacob mentions the angel who has delivered me from all harm, likely recalling his own encounters with God, particularly the mysterious wrestling with the angel in Genesis 32. By including this aspect of God's intervention, Jacob emphasizes God's role as both protector and redeemer. This adds a profound layer to the blessing. He isn't merely hoping for good fortune for Ephraim and Manasseh. He is invoking God's active, protective presence over them, similar to how God has protected him throughout his life. The phrase, "May they be called by my name and the names of my fathers Abraham and Isaac," signifies Jacob's desire for Ephraim and Manasseh to be firmly rooted in the identity and promises of Israel. Jacob is formally adopting them into the covenant family, ensuring that they inherit the same spiritual legacy. Finally, Jacob prays that they increase greatly on the earth, echoing the blessing of fruitfulness that God gave to Abraham, promising him descendants as numerous as the stars. This blessing is not only about physical prosperity, but about fulfilling God's plan for his people to multiply and thrive as a testament to his covenant. Verses 17 to 18. When Joseph saw his father placing his right hand on Ephraim's head, he was displeased. So he took hold of his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. Joseph said to him, "No, my father, this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head." Upon realizing that Jacob has placed his right hand on Ephraim's head instead of Manasseh's, Joseph becomes concerned. Joseph attempts to correct this perceived mistake by physically moving his father's hand, believing that Jacob has misinterpreted the traditional roles of the firstborn and the younger son. In ancient Near Eastern culture, the right hand was associated with authority, strength, and blessing, traditionally reserved for the firstborn to signify honor and inheritance. Joseph, understanding these customs, assumes that his father's act is an error due to his failing eyesight or age. However, Joseph's reaction also reveals something about his expectations. Despite all he has learned about God's ways, he still adheres to the cultural norm that the firstborn should receive the primary blessing. This moment of Joseph's reaction offers insight into how deeply ingrained societal customs are, even for those who have seen God work outside these conventions. Joseph's expectation that Manasseh should be favored highlights a human tendency to rely on tradition and convention rather than seeking God's unique purposes. Verse 19. But his father refused and said, "I know, my son, I know. He too will become a people, and he too will become great. Nevertheless, his younger brother will be greater than he, and his descendants will become a group of nations." Jacob, however, reassures Joseph that he is fully aware of what he is doing. His response, "I know, my son, I know," reveals a prophetic certainty that transcends Joseph's concerns. Jacob acknowledges that Manasseh will indeed become a great people, affirming that the firstborn will still have a significant legacy. But he explains that Ephraim, the younger, is destined for even greater prominence, with his descendants becoming a group of nations. This verse is not merely about familial preference, It reveals God's sovereignty over human traditions. The theme of the younger sibling surpassing the older is seen repeatedly in the Bible, such as with Isaac over Ishmael, Jacob over Esau, and David over his older brothers. Jacob's prophecy points forward to the future role of Ephraim's tribe, which will later dominate the northern kingdom of Israel, and often serve as a representation of Israel itself. This act of blessing Ephraim over Manasseh underscores the idea that God's purposes often defy human expectations, favoring those who may seem unlikely by cultural standards. Verse 20. He blessed them that day and said, "In your name will Israel pronounce this blessing. May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh." So he put Ephraim ahead of Manasseh. Jacob's words here establish Ephraim and Manasseh as symbols of divine blessing for future generations. By saying that Israel will bless their children by invoking Ephraim and Manasseh's names, Jacob is instituting a lasting tradition. The phrase, "May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh," becomes a model of blessing for the Israelites, signifying prosperity, favor, and God's faithfulness. This blessing is particularly significant because it includes both brothers, emphasizing unity and shared legacy, despite the distinction Jacob has made between them. By putting Ephraim ahead of Manasseh, Jacob not only reverses the traditional order, but also highlights the future prominence of Ephraim's lineage. The phrase, "So he put Ephraim ahead of Manasseh," solidifies the prophecy of Ephraim's destiny. This final placement signifies a lasting arrangement that reflects God's will rather than human convention, leaving a legacy that will define the identities of both tribes within Israel's history. Verses 21 to 22. Then Israel said to Joseph, "I am about to die, but God will be with you and take you back to the land of your fathers. And to you I give one more ridge of land than to your brothers, the ridge I took from the Amorites with my sword and my bow." In his final words to Joseph, Jacob reaffirms God's promise to be with him, reassuring Joseph that God will fulfill his promise to bring the family back to Canaan, the land of their fathers. Jacob's blessing does not end with Ephraim and Manasseh, it extends to Joseph as well. By affirming that God will be with Joseph, Jacob is passing on the assurance of God's presence, just as God was with him throughout his life. Jacob also bestows upon Joseph a special inheritance, a ridge of land, which he says he took from the Amorites with my sword and my bow. This reference is a symbolic declaration of Jacob's legacy and resilience. Although there is little context for a battle with the Amorites in Jacob's recorded story, this could be a reference to land acquired by divine favor, or even prophetic foresight of the land that will eventually belong to Israel. Jacob's gift of this additional piece of land signifies that Joseph will receive a double portion, further solidifying his favored status among his brothers. This ridge of land is meaningful because it ties Joseph's descendants to the land of promise. Although they live in Egypt now, Jacob's blessing ensures that their ultimate identity and inheritance are rooted in Canaan, the land God promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. By giving Joseph this extra inheritance, Jacob affirms that Joseph's legacy, embodied in Ephraim and Manasseh, is deeply intertwined with the future of Israel. Let's talk about the house of Judah and its connection to Ephraim. The relationship between Ephraim and the house of Judah is one of the most complex and significant in the history of Israel. From their early beginnings, these two tribes were poised to play foundational roles in the emerging nation, with Jacob's blessing in Genesis 48 laying the groundwork for what would become a lasting legacy. While Ephraim and Judah both shared in the covenant promises, their paths diverged in important ways, giving rise to a relationship that was at times marked by rivalry, tension, and even division, while at other moments it was characterized by unity and cooperation. Ephraim, the younger son of Joseph, received an unexpected elevation over his older brother Manasseh through Jacob's prophetic blessing. This decision established Ephraim as a central tribe within Israel. Later, Ephraim grew into a prominent and powerful tribe gaining influence in both military strength and social prestige. Over time, Ephraim's prominence became associated with the northern tribes of Israel, often seen as a leader among them. The tribe of Judah, however, also rose to significance, especially with the line of kings beginning with David, establishing Judah's authority as the tribe of royalty and spiritual leadership. The city of Jerusalem, located in Judah, became the center of Israel's worship and governance, further solidifying the tribe's importance. The division between Ephraim and Judah, though initially minor, became increasingly pronounced as both tribes sought leadership roles in Israel's development. While Ephraim held military and economic power, especially within the northern territories, Judah's authority was rooted in its royal lineage and the city of Jerusalem's spiritual authority. This contrast in power and influence gradually created a rift. Judah, with its Davidic line of kings, claimed a special place in Israel's identity, while Ephraim, proud of its own heritage and strength, often saw itself as an equal or even superior counterpart to Judah. The seeds of rivalry were already visible during the period of the Judges, a time when Israel struggled with internal conflicts and lacked centralized leadership. Ephraim, in particular, showed signs of asserting its dominance over other tribes, sometimes reacting negatively when it felt overlooked. For instance, in Judges 8, after Gideon led Israel to victory over the Midianites, the men of Ephraim confronted him, feeling slighted for not being included from the beginning of the battle. This reaction highlights Ephraim's desire for recognition and respect within the nation. Similarly, in Judges 12, Ephraim confronted Jephthah, another judge, leading to a bloody conflict between Ephraim and the eastern tribes, further exposing Ephraim's sensitivity to its standing among the tribes. As Israel transitioned from the period of the Judges to the monarchy, the tension between Ephraim and Judah grew more complex. Saul, Israel's first king, came from the tribe of Benjamin, which held close geographical and political ties with Ephraim. However, Saul's downfall and the rise of David from the tribe of Judah brought a shift in the balance of power. David's reign established the foundation of the united monarchy, and under his leadership, Israel experienced a period of unity and expansion. Despite the initial support David received from all tribes, including Ephraim, the lingering sense of rivalry persisted beneath the surface. Ephraim, known for its influence, may have found it challenging to accept Judah's rise to preeminence, especially as David's kingship solidified Judah's role as the tribe of royal authority. The reign of Solomon, David's son, was marked by prosperity and the building of the temple in Jerusalem, further anchoring Judah's spiritual and political influence. However, Solomon's rule also introduced policies that placed significant burdens on the northern tribes, including Ephraim, which felt the weight of heavy taxes and forced labor. This sense of economic strain and political marginalization became a source of resentment among the northern tribes, particularly Ephraim, which viewed itself as an equal contributor to Israel's success, but increasingly felt like a subordinate under Judah's dominance. The stage was set for division as feelings of discontent simmered among the northern tribes. Following Solomon's death, these tensions culminated in the division of the kingdom. Rehoboam, Solomon's son, inherited the throne and faced an immediate crisis. Representatives from the northern tribes, led by Jeroboam, an Ephraimite, requested relief from the heavy burdens Solomon had placed upon them. When Rehoboam rejected their plea and instead threatened harsher treatment, the northern tribes rebelled, splitting from the Davidic monarchy and establishing the northern kingdom of Israel with Jeroboam as their king. This rebellion was not merely a political secession, but a symbolic assertion of Ephraim's long-standing desire for autonomy and leadership. The division between the northern kingdom, Israel, and the southern kingdom, Judah, became a permanent and defining feature of Israel's history. Under Jeroboam's rule, Ephraim assumed a prominent role in the northern kingdom, often symbolizing Israel itself. Jeroboam's decision to establish alternative centers of worship in Bethel and Dan, both strategically located in the north, was a way to prevent the northern tribes from returning to Jerusalem for religious observances. However, this move further distanced Ephraim from Judah, creating a spiritual rift as well as a political one. The northern kingdom's separation from the temple in Jerusalem led to religious practices that often diverged from the Mosaic traditions, straining the already fragile relationship with Judah. Over the centuries, the northern kingdom of Israel, frequently referred to as Ephraim due to the tribe's prominence, and the southern kingdom of Judah experienced periods of hostility, occasional alliances, and moments of cooperation. Military conflicts between the two kingdoms were common, with each side vying for control and influence over the other. The prophets of this period often spoke to both kingdoms, urging them to turn back to God and to remember their shared heritage. Yet, the political divide proved difficult to bridge, and the two kingdoms developed distinct identities. Ephraim's association with the northern kingdom and its subsequent religious practices led to a tension with Judah, which viewed itself as the guardian of true worship centered in Jerusalem. Despite the division, there were moments of unity and cooperation between Ephraim and Judah, especially when facing common threats. Both kingdoms occasionally allied with each other, or with neighboring nations, to fend off external enemies, such as the Arameans and Assyrians. However, these alliances were often short-lived and driven by necessity rather than true reconciliation. As the Assyrian Empire expanded, the northern kingdom came under increasing pressure. In 722 BCE, the Assyrians captured Samaria, leading to the exile and dispersal of the northern tribes. The fall of the northern kingdom was a devastating event that left Judah as the last remaining representative of the original 12 tribes in the land. After the northern kingdom's fall, Judah continued to exist as a separate entity, but the prophetic vision of a united Israel remained alive. Prophets like Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel spoke of a future reunification, where Ephraim and Judah would once again come together as one nation under God. These prophecies envisioned a restored Israel where the historical divisions would be healed, and both Ephraim and Judah would be united in worship and purpose. This vision of unity symbolized not only a political reunification, but also a spiritual restoration, where the fractured identity of Israel would be mended. The relationship between Ephraim and Judah serves as a powerful metaphor for division and reconciliation. While they were divided by political ambition, geographical separation, and at times, divergent religious practices, the underlying desire for unity persisted. The longing for reunification expressed in the prophetic texts points to a hope that transcends historical conflicts. For the prophets, the reunification of Ephraim and Judah was more than a political ideal. It was a reflection of God's desire for his people to live in harmony, bound by their shared covenant. In later Jewish tradition, Ephraim and Judah's relationship also becomes a symbolic foreshadowing of the messianic hope. Many saw the reunification of these tribes as a sign of the coming messianic age, a time when Israel would be fully restored and the divisions of the past erased. This hope reflects a broader understanding that God's promises encompass not only individual tribes or families, but the entire people of Israel. Through reconciliation, the people of Israel would embody the unity and peace that God intended for his chosen nation. Today, the story of Ephraim and Judah continues to offer lessons on the importance of unity, respect for diverse roles, and the resilience of God's promises. Their history reminds us that even amid conflict and separation, there exists the possibility of restoration and shared purpose. Ephraim's ascendancy in the north and Judah's royal line in the south illustrate how different strengths can contribute to the well-being of a larger community when guided by faith and covenant. We only ask for one thing in return. If this story gave you new insights, please give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. By subscribing, you're joining a community that's dedicated to exploring these powerful stories, finding meaning and growing together. Share this journey with us, and let's uncover the wisdom and strength that these ancient truths still offer us today. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.